Post-meeting activities in this 2023 ASEAN Summit that ends tomorrow are the expected joint statements declaring stronger economic, diplomatic, trade, and food security cooperation. Yet tomorrow's East Asia Summit meeting, which will be attended by 18 heads of state and/or their representatives, is forecast to take up the cumbersome issues of North Korea missiles, China's ambitious expansion in the South China Sea, the war in Ukraine, among others. Our Alan Francisco tells us more on joint statements, or lack thereof, issued thus far live in Jakarta. Alan.
Monique, President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr. has been so busy today in attending a series of events in which important issues such as the South China Sea were in agenda.
A peaceful resolution of the territorial dispute in the South China Sea. This is what President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr. emphasized in his intervention at the 43rd ASEAN Summit retreat in Jakarta, Indonesia. This in the middle of a challenge faced by the ASEAN for international order, grounded on the rule of law, to be a subject for forces with ambition in the South China Sea issue.
The Philippines firmly rejects misleading narratives that frame the disputes in the South China Sea solely through the lens of strategic competition between two powerful countries. This not only denies us our independence and our agency, but it also disregards our own legitimate interests.
He said the Philippines is ready to cooperate with all countries to promote rules-based international order, as well as freedom of navigation and overflight in the South China Sea, pursuant to the 1982 United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea.
It is imperative that we leverage the ASEAN regional architecture to serve as a diplomatic bridge that promises mutual understanding, strategic trust, and peaceful settlement of disputes.
The President called for self-restraint from activities that could worsen the status of territorial disputes. At the same time, President Marcos called on the ASEAN to support the operationalization of administrative guidelines for maritime interaction. He also mentioned the second ASEAN multilateral naval exercise held in Zambales and Bataan and the 40th meeting of the Joint Working Group on the Declaration on the Conduct of Parties in the South China Sea.
The Philippines is also pleased to have hosted the second ASEAN multilateral naval exercise of Zambales and Bataan and the 40th meeting of the JWD-DOC in Manila to expedite the negotiations for a substantive and effective code of conduct in the South China Sea.
Meanwhile, the President praised the latest developments in the negotiations on the Code of Conduct in the South China Sea held in Manila a few weeks ago. And he said all the discussions and deliberations were in accordance with international law. He said this at the ASEAN-China Summit.
This year marks the 20th anniversary of China's accession to the Treaty of Amity and Cooperation in Southeast Asia, a valuable commitment by our countries to universal multilateralism and the rules-based international order.
Meanwhile, the President also attended the ASEAN-United States Summit, where he highlighted the efforts of the U.S. government to support the region in achieving the goals of ASEAN. Other events attended by President Marcos were ASEAN Republic of Korea Summit, ASEAN Japan Summit, ASEAN Canada Summit, and a lot more. President Marcos also had a bilateral meeting with Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. The Prime Minister invited President Marcos to visit Canada next year.
Monique, tonight is the gala night of the world leaders and it is now being hosted by 2023 ASEAN Chair and Indonesian President Joko Widodo. And live here in Jakarta, Indonesia, Monique.
Many thanks, Alan Francisco.